IPL 2024 is the highest scoring T20 tournament ever. Teams have crossed 258 times. It's a run fest, right? However, despite all the madness, no batter has been able to score 87 runs off their first 25 balls in an innings so far this year. Even when it seemed like a batter like Jake Fraser-McGurk or Travis Head was hitting everything out of the park, that number has not been eclipsed or matched. And why are we talking about the number 87? And this isn't because this is the unlucky number in Australia, which is also a made-up story, but that's for another day. It's because Suresh Raina did it against Punjab way back in 2014 in a playoff. That innings was an outlier in the truest sense of the word. But when you think of Raina, you picture a trademark inside-out over-cover shot. He would play that against pace and spin. I don't think any player had ever nailed that shot the way that he did until he came along. People didn't used to hit sixes over cover. Suresh Raina did it all the time. And apart from all of his batting achievements, he was also a fantastic fielder, probably one of the best produced by India at that point, and also a useful part-time spinner. And when we talk about all-time IPL 11s, a lot of people have Raina at number 3 in their lineups. In fact, it's not even that hot a take to call him the greatest Indian batter in the IPL. But despite that, he doesn't get talked about in the same hushed tones that other players do who have sometimes worse records than him and sometimes nowhere near his record.
If you need a VPN, go Nord. Use nordvpn.com/Kimber to get a 2-year contract with a discount, plus 4 extra months, plus gifts in some markets. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the show notes. Protect your computer like a blocker protects the stumps with NordVPN today.
We use true stats because they tell us how much better or worse a player performs than the average if they'd faced the exact same balls, right? This also accounts for venues, so the players who have played in low-scoring matches aren't penalised for that. Among the batters with 4,000 runs in IPL history, only 3 batters have a better true average and true strike rate than Suresh Raina. Do you want me to list them for you? It's Chris Gayle, AB de Villiers, and David Warner. And if we just looked at true strike rates on their own, there are still only 3 players ahead of him on this list. Faf du Plessis is the closest to him. 85.5% of all of his innings came at number 3. That is not a glamorous position in T20 cricket. And his name is synonymous with that. In fact, the number 3 is even on his jersey. And that is best suited for a batter who plays spin well but can also maximise the power play by going up against the quicks. The players that get the most accolades by fans are those who open because they're almost always amongst the top run scorers chart, or those who finish the innings and have a high strike rate. However, the guys in the middle are often forgotten, and that's part of the reason that Suresh Raina doesn't have the reputation that his record probably demands. And if a good number 3 is a depth versus pace and spin, Raina wasn't just a good number 3, he was great in that position. He was a good player of pace bowling, especially when the power play field was up, and yet he definitely preferred facing the spinning ball, something that is very handy for a number 3 batter who played a lot of his games at Chepauk. And if we take a deeper look into his record versus each bowling type, he was at his very best against left-arm finger spin. That's not a surprise because he's left-handed. He only ever made 67 runs against left-arm wrist spinners, so we can pretty much ignore that. But here's the one that I like. A left-hander with such a good record against off-spin shows that he was a brilliant player of the turning ball. His lowest true average was against right-arm wrist spin, which is weird for a lefty. But he was still above the neutral and at a true strike rate of more than 13. Against the quicks, he was better against right arm than left, but that's fairly common if we're being honest. It was overs 4 to 14 where this stallion grazed the most. That is a huge amount of time spent in what we often call the agreed upon middle overs. But he also had to handle the tricky period at the end of the power play after the wickets had fallen, and he was still fantastic at that. If we break down Raina's record into phases, he's a plus batter in every phase of the innings. But the most fascinating part is how brilliant he was between overs 7 and 11. A part of the innings where most batters actually slow down quite a bit. And he was playing at a time when that was almost automatically done. He did not do that. We often see certain batters who are significantly better at either batting first or chasing, often due to technical reasons or practical reasons. But you can see here that Raina has a slightly higher true average in chases than the first innings, but he's basically the same player in both. And the main reason I'm showing you this is to compare it to Dhoni and Kohli. These are 2 legends, and part of that is what happens at the end of games. They chase and they win. And from a legend standpoint, being the man at the end with a win is the better option. Raina was the same player in either innings, and a lot of his best work was forgotten by the end of the match. I mean, Raina has a better record in the IPL than Dhoni, but one of them was in and scoring runs at the end of an awful lot of matches. And of course, this is just the IPL. Dhoni also did this for India at high level. MS's legacy is being the man we look at when the game is over. Raina had a completely different path. And when you look at Raina's raw numbers, I think sometimes you think he was another Indian anchor. And we see a lot of them who start very quickly in their innings, then they knock the ball around for the rest of their time. Raina made the runs of an anchor, but his strike rate was way above average for most of his career, and more importantly, most of his innings. He would dip slightly at the end, and that could have been fitness, or just a period when he had to face the quicks without the help of the power play fields. Because he was a beautiful striker at the ball, but he was not good at muscling it over the boundary. And when we start talking up someone with true strike rate, usually that means that they probably weren't a great run scorer or a little bit inconsistent. Somehow, while Raina was a quick scoring number 3, he was also an incredibly consistent run scorer. From 2008 to 2014, he crossed the 400 run mark every single season. He would go on to make over 500 runs 3 times in those 7 years. Death taxes and Suresh Raina scoring over 400 runs was our reality, and it brought a sense of comfort and safety amongst Chennai fans. Sadly, after that period, he was beyond his prime, although he was still a pretty good player up until basically the end. But 2013 was his best season, and by a distance. And there is another pattern here. All the seasons where he had a true strike rate of 10 or more came in those peak years. He had a negative true average in 5 seasons, and he only had 3 seasons where he had a negative true average as well as a negative true strike rate. He was almost always in form, and at worst, he was marginally under par. And that's right up until 2021, which was probably 1 year too many for him. And it is fair to say that his career should be looked at in 2 halves. His numbers from 2008 to 2014, very close to AB de Villiers and David Warner's overall numbers. So peak Raina was up there with the greatest IPL batters of all time. But he was still definitely a net positive in the second half of his career. And remember, he's not just a batter. This guy bowled. Now we are talking more Glenn Maxwell than Glenn McGrath. And his off-spin was not as high usage as someone like Maxwell's, but he did bowl more than 20 overs a year from 2009 to 2011. His off-spin was a pretty helpful option. He was not an all-rounder, but a good backup 6th bowler. And you would expect most offies to be better against left-handers than right-handers. But there's actually not that much of a difference in Raina's record. He had a better true economy against the right-handers, but took a lot more wickets when he went up against the lefties. But he had a positive true economy against both types of batters. So he was a net positive part-time bowler. And if you throw in his fielding, he's the sort of 3D player that India still craves today. However, he didn't have the greatest Indian career. If he was an unquestioned great in the IPL, and he was an unquestioned great in the IPL, he was just a very good player for India, meaning almost all of his legacy does come from the IPL. Compare that to Dhoni or Kohli. The difference is massive. He played at number 5 and number 4 in the 2014 and 16 T20 World Cups. And there's a case to be made that he wasn't actually batted in the right position. In hindsight, a top order of Rohit, Kohli and Raina would have worked a lot better for them. Instead, they kept trying to make Dhawan and Rahane work. And I think him not being one of the top Indian stars is a reason he just didn't get paid enough. A guy who made 400 almost every year and did it way quicker than most players with that kind of consistency should have been a regular top earner. Yet Raina was never paid all that much considering he was a star almost every single season. He had 1 year of 12.5 crore. Shikhar Dhawan had 4 of them. Of course, being the second biggest star in your own team never helped that much either. But while Dhoni's keeping and captaincy made a huge difference to his overall legacy, Raina was the better IPL batter. His case as the greatest Indian IPL batter is incredibly strong. And part of his issue during his career is that we didn't have advanced numbers back then. We were looking at total runs, and of course the openers were going to do a lot more of that. We were then fixated on the end of games, and MS Dhoni sort of cleaned that up. But Suresh Raina was way ahead of his time, and he was a massive part of why CSK won so many games and titles. Every year, CSK could make their pitchers turn, pick a bunch of spinners, and know that their middle order would be carried by a man who would make a lot of runs and fast. A lot of people complain that I'm not a former cricketer, and so that I don't really know the game. Well, you know what they can't claim? That I don't know desks. I've been using desks for years. I'm a collector of desks, old and new, and I am sitting on a new one right now. I am the Don Bradman of sitting at desks. So when I tell you that the E7 Pro next generation height adjustable desk from FlexiSpot is legit, this is like Michael Jordan talking to you about sneakers. This desk holds 160 kilograms. It is as stable as anything I've ever seen, and it has under-desk cable management. But really, the main skill here is that this desk rises and falls at the push of a button. and it moves super quick. And it has so many settings that remember your favorite heights. It really does it all. And I could not recommend the E7 Pro from FlexiSpot anymore, even though I am currently sitting on one of FlexiSpot's BS12 Pro multifunctional, adjustable, upgraded fabric, ergonomic chairs. My butt and computer have never been happier than when using one of FlexiSpot's products. So get over to their page right now for big savings.